Hello and welcome back to the vCD Roundtable. We skipped the December and the January episode and are coming back now in February, March. And as of today, we have 5 people joining us for this week's roundtable. Let's start the usual round. I'm going to hand over to Matthias and he can pick who's going to be next. My name is Yves Sanford. I'm CEO of the Comdivision Group and I do service provider architecture day in and day out when I'm not doing crazy TikToks. Matthias, after you.
Yeah, thanks. Welcome 2022. It's Matthias, Comdivision partner over here, taking care of service providers and mainly the automation part, VRO, Terraform now starting, so interesting stuff. Next, from my point of view, is Romain.
I knew it. Romain Decker, working for VMware as a technical product manager, covering everything networking. So that's vast. So everything networking and security. Tobias?
Yes, thanks, Romain. Tobias Baschek, working for Comdivision as a partner, covering also security and networking stuff. And the last but not least, heading over to Jörg.
Yeah, Jörg Lev. I'm a technical product manager at VMware for Cloud Director and all the different integrations and extensions that we have for vCD.
Good. As security was already twice the topic now, one of the first topics we wanted to cover is something which came up and made at least the Christmas days. I'm not sure. For some, it made it more miserable, and some actually had the excuse that they had to work the whole Christmas time. But we had this massive Log4j scenario hitting all products across the industry. I mean, this was far more than just hitting the VMware folks, and we have seen several incidents at service providers. Luckily, at least for those which I work with, I haven't seen anyone being affected by a production scenario. But it more or less came as a heavy surprise, and in some spaces even how deeply integrated these services and solutions are, and how difficult it can be to patch these systems, especially if not all vendors have immediate responses. And some vendors even give wrong responses. I had one example of one vendor actually telling me they would not be affected because their system is not accessible from the internet, where I said, it's like, yeah, but I can log in over a web portal, which is exposed over the internet. So you obviously haven't understood what the problem is with this scenario. But the impact was quite heavy on the service provider industry, and reminding everybody is like, yeah, you really need to have a procedure in place that you can upgrade your or update your infrastructure within more or less hours or days, but weeks would have not been an option when we have seen how much of an impact it is. What have you seen across the board, across the service providers? How quickly were they able to respond to it? Any interesting incidents? I know for sure we will not name anyone, but I have seen at least in several log entries where customers or even through the login systems, people were trying to misuse this. Who wants to go first?
I can give it a head start. So I think it was a very interesting time, and I completely agree what you've said. So what I saw during that phase, so I had a couple of calls scheduled with a few service providers, and my whole schedule just got messed up because everyone just sent me an email like, yeah, we need to cancel our appointments because we need to take care of this massive incident. We need everybody we can get hand-on being able to read a blog article and install a workaround or a patch. And we need all the other guys taking care of creating all the changes to document all the steps we take for the future and stuff. So I haven't seen a service provider, at least I'm working with, who was not taking that incident serious. And I've seen one having a development or just a testing infrastructure which might be got encrypted via that bug. So it's massive. And personally, I would like to say thanks to VMware because they came up pretty fast with a lot of articles describing how to implement the workaround, and they have a proper list saying, right, for product A, we have a workaround, for product B, we have a patch. Please come back regularly to check back if there is a new update in terms of a workaround or a final patch. So that was pretty good answer to the whole situation. So that's what I saw.
And also on the, sorry, Romain, for interrupting you, and also on the other hand, what I have seen, and that was I also have implemented at 2 service providers, is how quickly VMware reacted and provided some additional functionality, how you can secure your environment with NSXT, but also NSXT was affected. So this was the 2 sides of the medal. At one side, yes, you need to patch your NSXT environment, but also on the other hand, you had the possibility to utilize NSXT and secure your environment. So now hand over to Roman, sorry.
Yeah, that was going to be my comment actually, because we provided fairly quickly like a signature to like prevent code execution using the NSXT IDS IPS. And it was also available for those who have like a VMC environment automatically. Yeah, and also using NSX ALB, some WAF signatures and so on. But you mentioned quickly that NSXT was affected, but like it also like pose a question of should NSXT be accessible from the external?
That's always a good point. Is like how many systems should be accessed externally. But I think one of the underestimated issues, which a lot of people have said in the beginning, is like, yeah, no one is accessing the Log4j system. Where you had to think about is like, no, you don't need to have access to the Log4j system in this scenario. It's like if any log entry, and that was really why I think this was kind of the security incidents of the security incidents. It was this whole scenario on the pure fact that as long as someone can log into a system or someone caused the logging system to create an entry, you were basically affected by this, and that was really why I think why it hit so many people so hard, and it was really interesting to see how different vendors reacted to it. As Toby said, it's like the VMware lists were pretty intense and actually quickly and easily to follow. Some other vendors were really bizarre, and for some it took even over 48 hours until they had first responses, which was more or less completely shocking, because that is like when you see nowadays how quick people in the industry actually or people on the wrong side of the industry actually have kits and infiltrate systems with it. It's like 48 hours is, if that's the first time when you get any response from a vendor that they might be affected, and then another 48 hours before they provide you with a patch. By that, you might actually already be land under or down under.
But that leads to a very, very interesting discussion from my point of view. What's better, having an infrastructure on premises or utilize cloud-based infrastructure? Because on-prem, we see a lot of enterprises stripping down their IT departments in terms of money. So they're not spending enough money, having enough people on site, taking care of all the systems. And just think about it. What if you have, let's say, 100 servers and a couple of physical devices, and you need to patch every single system in terms of Log4j, which was a high risk. So how fast can you do it? How fast are you able to collect all needed information from different vendors to patch all your systems according being safe again?
Yeah, I think that kind of inventory management is one key for that, so that you are at least aware of all the different systems that are in your network and the different versions that are in place there. And that's also, well, something, I mean, for us as a software vendor, we have these challenges, given the bug in this case was part of a library, and to figure out where that library is used in the software is a big challenge. And well, a lot to be learned, but on the other hand, from a VMware perspective, you can see that we have these kind of inventory and dependency management systems in place that allowed us to react super quickly in this issue. Now, from an infrastructure provider or a consumer of these software products, it's pretty much the same challenge, that you need to know which product is in place, where, connected to which network parts, and then, yeah, of course, be able to react properly and have proper procedures and in place, hopefully, yeah, that allow you to react properly and quickly.
But that is potentially, at least from what I have seen and what I heard, is also a lesson learned for the Carbon Black team, because they could have been much faster in actually providing an automatic identifier for it, because they have the information about that, at least for endpoints. It's not helping you for servers, but many companies, I think, were also surprised, not necessarily affecting us from a service provider discussion perspective, but how many endpoint applications have had Log4j implemented. Because in reality, I mean, I have done many years Java development myself. It is and was the standard methodology on how you were doing log management, period. And so there was no discussion whether you were using it. There were also really barely any alternatives which came up to it, or were not actually having any other issues. So I think it's going to be interesting. And I think it's also going to be interesting seeing how many more similar incidents we have. It's a proof of the whole argument, which is always, especially in the open source world, always the argument is like, open source is so much more secure because so many people can look into the code. It's like, yes, but if that really is true, then we wouldn't have seen things like Log4j and a lot of the SSL issues in the last few years. And a lot of these scenarios, and I'm not saying commercial is any better, but the whole argument of open source is more secure because people are reviewing the code is like, that seems to not necessarily work. Otherwise, scenarios like that should not happen in the first place, especially not for something that important.
I think that's not really any valid discussion to have, because there are so many examples for both sides. I mean, pretty much a year ago, we had the big SolarWinds supply chain issue without any open source components. So yeah, it affects both, and I guess it gets very philosophical and does not help anyone to try to fight a fight that doesn't need to be fighted.
No,
rather, I think it's rather important, or given the amount or the impact of this kind of bug or security issue, hopefully makes people aware that they have to be prepared, and no matter what kind of software they are using, there will be these bugs in commercial software, in open source software going on, and there's no point or no chance to avoid this kind of stuff, but rather be prepared and have procedures in place to react quickly.
But that's also
sorry, I think it just revealed the lack of documentation most companies, enterprises are facing in terms of which software is in place, which software is installed on which system, at least to find affected systems quicker than just like walking around like, oh, there's a server. I haven't seen this one for 3 years. Oh, nice. I haven't installed any security updates for a couple of years because I didn't know that system exists. So I think the lack of documentation is a big thing which we should take care of in the future.
I think it's overall, it's also showing that how complex the infrastructure, or the more and more we move from a hardware-based stack into a software stack, the more we move also networking and other components into a software stack, how much more important it will be moving forward to get proper software lifecycle management in place. In a few years' time, it will become more and more difficult to manually maintain your vSphere, NSX, vCD, and 15,000 other components, especially now that we are starting to see more and more container solutions and other things coming into play, which have completely different release cycles and are much faster from a release pace perspective. This is going to be, I think, a very, very interesting procedure moving forward, how lifecycle management comes into play. Also from all of these dependencies. It's like if you are currently in a service provider environment and you have manually installed a vCD and everything else, The last time I did it for a South American service provider, I think it took me 1 or 2 hours until I had all the dependencies actually written down and more or less compiled an upgrade path from where they were to where they needed to be. And all of that is just then the validation that the versions are correct. That doesn't mean that the data and everything else is in place and nothing else goes wrong. So I think moving forward, we will also see more and more providers really rethink if they really want to maintain all of that manually, or if they want to build their own automation procedure for it, or jump into toolkits like VCF or SDDC Manager to take some of that abstraction layer away from them.
I think that's already the good starting point. I think already and also here, great work by VMware is already that here the lifecycle manager for cloud providers. This is the important part. The lifecycle manager for cloud providers really supports us here, doing the whole upgrade stuff and so on. So this is really already good starting point with the release. I think it was by the end of October last year that the cloud provider lifecycle manager has been released, where we can now deploy the whole cloud director stuff, RabbitMQ based on Bitnami, I think already. Yeah, it's already based on Bitnami, and more products to follow. So Tenant App I think Tenant App is already also in there, and more products will follow into the stuff. And this really makes stuff like Log4j hopefully much easier in the future to react for Log4j.
Yeah, but also, I mean, coming back to lifecycle management, one of the things is, as we skip the end of January event, we should have actually had the it's the end of NSXV party. To be realistic, when I look at my schedule, and I think everybody else can easily join into that, I seem to have more meetings. I have more meetings which involve NSXV, but luckily at the end of the meeting is also NSXV 2T migration project that's kicking off. It seems that companies and providers are finally getting to the point that they now need to migrate, now that VMware really hasn't extended support for it. I think some were still waiting up until end of January. It's like, maybe they do it. Maybe they will just actually extend it for another year. But we still see that service providers are actually starting it. And again, we see different projects going on from providers. What I see again and again, and I just wanted to reiterate that across the board, is like, is the whole discussion that most service providers are not aware on the changes this migration brings with it. The whole discussion on how you change routing and everything else. I mean, we covered that in a previous session again, but I just wanted to reiterate that for providers, because very often people get confused when they involve us or VMware PSO or others, that, hey, we need to start with a design session, because everybody is still of the opinion it's like, hey, we just run the upgrade procedure and then everything is going to be fine. We need additional hardware because we need to migrate workloads from one side to another. That could be done in the place of a migration project or something else. There are other rethinkings, like how do you do routing, security, and other pieces. Maybe into the overall group is like, do you see this as well from the projects, that service providers are not necessarily always that prepared for what it really means and underestimate the effort of the project? Still, I mean, we have been talking about it for nearly a year now. Maybe Romain, I'm pushing this over to you for first.
I thought everyone had migrated yet. No, I mean, I have certainly seen like a lot of increased, like over like 2021, increased interest about V2T migration, and a number of discussions with also the challenges that we are hearing and listening to. And then it was quite calm, I would say, in December and January. And now it's starting to ramping up again. And indeed, a lot of people are waking up. They were just expecting that we extend support although we have been quite clear about that since the beginning. The engineering team continues to develop the NSXV2T migration tool. We have a long backlog of items, so we have a 1.3.2 release coming up in a few weeks. We are waiting actually for some vCD API to change, and then we will have a subsequent release and so on and so on. So the tool is still being developed, although I would say that at least half of the provider could migrate today completely, and the other half could easily start to migrate most of their workload. And if they don't know how, they can contact us, and we can provide guidance on how to mitigate some of the blocking items. That's okay. So the things that we continue to develop are more nice to have, or things that will ease the migration process, but not that are completely blocking the migration process.
So to be fair, the latest update, so with the release of the 1.3, already NSX ALP is inside there. So you can also now migrate your existing NSXV load balancer to NSX ALP.
That was there actually since 1.1.
Yeah, yeah, it was 1.1. So it is also inside there, because this was the last time I was really surprised to say, hey, cool, now load balancing is also there. The funny thing is, and I'm currently working on a migration project. This is what Yves already mentioned before. Now more and more the service providers came up with the fenced vApps and saying, hey, okay, how can we do this? And oh, we need really to change our routing. We need to change our nothing. This is really something which have been overseen by service providers since ages, because we know that the fenced network are completely gone in NSXT. They are not possible anymore. And more providers are surprised and say, hey, oh, how can we handle the fenced network in the future? And yes, still they are more or less a roadblocker for the migration tool itself, because we need to figure out the solution before. But it is there. We know now how we can address these issues. This is what I have seen in the last more or less 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, but for the fence vApp, I want to jump on that. It's a lot of, well, I would say, I don't say, let me take that back. We do have some providers and some customers, they just expect the NSXT and the workloads managed and connected by and secured by NSXT working 100% the same way that they did with NSXV. And we all know that will not be true. There may be some changes in the UI or in the API or even in how they operationalize their tasks, or the tenants manage their workloads and so on. And the fence vApp is a good example, because fencing is something that is coming from back in the days, and it was using some very specific feature that NSXV offered, like the proxy R on the ESG that is automatically instantiated. But you only need that if you have one big flat network, and if you want to have like the internal vApp network on the same subnet. That's the only use case where you need that. And I would question that design. I know it's easy and it's simple and it simplifies things for troubleshooting and for development and for all the development use case. But with a small minor change, you can actually overcome the fencing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing
sorry, but just to finish, some people, they just don't want to change, and it's not a hard change. I understand the migration is always painful. I've been through that, and I've been a customer, a system integrator before, and I've gone through migrations even more painful than that one. And it's not easy, it's not funny, but I would let's just migrate everything and then we'll be done.
What I would like to add, because I agree 100% with Romain, what I would like to add is what I saw in the past, where companies, service providers, as well as enterprises, just waiting for something. Please click here, and the whole migration will be done automatically for you. It's just do it in place, whatever. So many companies are just used to that behavior, but VMware and the whole BU were completely honest in the communication, saying there will be no just click here, in place upgrade done. Please take care of your migration path transitioning from V to T, and the communication was 100% clear, at least from my point of view. And I guess that still many companies are just waiting for the magic tool taking care of everything to get your whole infrastructure from V to T.
Exactly. And I don't want to be selfish here, but it's also frustrates me because some people some customers and some providers are waiting. It's actually taking times from the engineering team to not focus on advanced services and advanced future next gen networking and security services that we could focus on. So the complete NSXT and vCD integration is actually slowed down by the number of vCD instances that have not been migrated to NSXT yet, because we have to really talk, to join in meetings, to focus on very small specific edits and new features. But that's actually consuming a ton of time that we cannot really dedicate to future development, and that personally frustrates me a bit.
Yeah, fully on that, Romain, because this is also something I see, that at the moment it looks like it just looks like that the deeper integration from newer features from NSXT, and we have seen this with the release of NSXT 3.2, which, by the way, was not really the best release of NSXT at the starting point, and then with the second shot it was fine, but this time it really has taken a little while until NSXT 3.2 was supported by vCloud Director. So this is really something where I see what you are saying right now, that still the BU and the engineering teams needs to have a look at the whole migration story, and not going on and bring in new features. Whatever is there on the roadmap. We don't need to talk about roadmap right now. Because as you mentioned, we really need to finish the migration right as soon as possible, because more and more service providers will really run into issues in the near future.
But I would just really clarify that we do have different teams working on both, like new features and the V2T. But I mean, the core networking team of vCD has to work on some edits to cope for the V2T migration as well. But yeah, I'm impatient that everything will be done and everyone is migrated and happy, and
yeah,
then
but
we can move on.
I'm currently thinking, because have you any idea when was the first time saying, oh, we have NSXT, we will be gone in the future somewhere, and there will be no in-place migration path from V to T? I think it was 2 years ago VMware made that statement.
Yes.
Roughly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, even more than that.
Oh yeah.
even more, because I think the announcement was in VMworld Barcelona. Last time we have been in Barcelona in person. So it is more or less three. We are already running up to 3 years.
Let's say 2.5.
Okay, let's say 2.5.
Let's give math a chance.
Yeah, it was Barcelona 2019.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
Good, but enough looking back, I would say, is where are we? What are we expecting for this year? I mean,
VMworld in person. Sorry.
But still, we are working towards that.
Yeah, I hope so.
I know that Toby has already booked his flight. He's so convinced that VMworld in person will happen that he already booked his US flights. So that's definitely on the list. And I think the US one definitely is going to happen. I would be more concerned about Europe, but Mobile World Congress happens this week as well. So why shouldn't we be able to do that then from that perspective? But some of the things, I mean, last year, the whole announcement around sovereign cloud and things like that, I've thought about that quite a bit lately, also in preparation as I'm preparing a few keynotes for a few cloud conferences moving forward. When I talk to customers at the moment on the other, so customers of service providers, I don't see them really massively looking into that they as if they were worried about it, because they say it's like, we are going to use Office 365 anyway, so we are already using Microsoft, we are going to use AWS anyways. It's like, so for me the question is, do we really see that much push from customers towards it, or Romain is nodding, so he needs to say.
Yeah, I thought that someone would jump in, but I'm seeing like use cases and a need, but it's never like for the complete infrastructure. It's always for specific parts of the infrastructure. If you take like now something that talks to everyone, COVID-19, with all the vaccination campaign in France, I will talk for France because I know the rules and the compliance here. The health data has to be stored somewhere in the country. But the company that does the vaccination and the institution that has like the framework and the backend around like scheduling the appointments and so on, they don't need to have that specific in a cloud that is stored in France. They use some pieces of AWS and some pieces of cloud, of a sovereign cloud in France. So it's never white or black. It's never like 0 or 100%. It's always for small pieces, I think, and that in that sense, it's I think it will definitely make sense.
Yeah, and it will be for, especially when we look at the market outside of the United States, for providers in Europe and in Asia Pacific, it will be not too hard for them to become a sovereign cloud provider, or like a certified sovereign cloud provider, because they already in most cases have local data centers. If they run these data centers, they have management and data in-house. So and as Romain mentioned, from a customer perspective, we see that demand, especially for environments where there are some compliance requirements, and for service providers that are already have already a footprint that is local within a country or a jurisdiction. It's a good opportunity for them to capture these workloads and to be able to offer that kind of sovereign cloud services as well.
Matthias, Toby, any ideas from your sides? How do you see that with the service providers you work with? Is there a big push for that, or?
So the service providers I'm working with are more concerned about ramping up specific services in their infrastructure, enabling them to provide services to their customers, like TKGM, for example, or stuff like this. But they're thinking about like getting Azure desktops into their offerings, or add very specific features or services from public clouds, like Romain mentioned. But I'm not seeing sovereign currently, but it's just my really narrowed down view I currently have.
It's the same from my side, like Matthias mentioned. My two service providers, which are based in Germany at the moment, more and more try to become to go the way with the sovereign cloud infrastructure, to have, but also here to have specific services hosted in the public cloud, like already Matthias mentioned, Kubernetes is at the moment here really an interesting part, TKGM and so on, and the stuff which will be covered in one of our next sessions. But yes, I also, from my perspective, it's the clear way to go. This will be the future, especially as Jörg mentioned already outside of the US.
Speaking about the US, one of the interesting topics which I have seen lately come up more and more from service providers is that something which we discussed in the past already, but I see more and more requests now going down that pathway where service providers really open up discussions whether they should really build certain types of infrastructure. So one of the discussions I had lately was a service provider who was thinking about whether they will build a desktop as a service infrastructure themselves anymore, or leverage just a Microsoft or something else cloud and build front ends and everything else around that. So that is also, I think, a change which I constantly keep seeing more and more, that service providers start thinking about what are the services, like, I mean, what we originally would expect from enterprises as well. What are the services we are really good in, which we should build ourselves? What are services where we are potentially becoming more like a reseller and build add-on services on top of it? And what are services which we let someone else operate and we just repurchase them or provide them through? So that seems to be more and more a point, but that's also driven by I mean, the things we see currently in the industry, like hardware shortages, where it's not just only that they want to do that approach, but also because they don't necessarily get the hardware or anything else. Plus, I mean, Microsoft with M365 making clear, let's see, or showing clear directions that they have the opinion that what they have done with Office 365 potentially is going to happen next for the desktop system, where really you can't get out of the subscription model anymore. And then it will be more and more customers who want to run that in their structure from that perspective.
Yeah, that is absolutely something that we have, mind, and we are working actively since a couple of years now for that model that we have. Service provider partners that are cloud builders, they run their own data centers, operate their own data centers, and sell services on top of their own infrastructure. But we also have a lot of service providers that are rather asset light, so they don't own their own data centers, but build services on top of other providers' gears or hyperscaler gear. And that is something that we in our product portfolio cover pretty well, because we give service provider partners the options to do both and to combine that very easily. So when you think about Cloud Director, we of course have the Cloud Director on-premises installation where for cloud builders to operate a multi-tenant cloud in a shared infrastructure in their own data centers. But then we also have Cloud Director Service, which is a service Cloud Director installation managed by VMware that can connect to hyperscaler data centers as backend. For now, VMC on AWS, of course, but on the roadmap, we are working with the other VMware stack on the other hyperscalers as well to support that in Cloud Director Service. And as a service provider, you can combine both of them with the multi-site functionality in Cloud Director. And that is something we see a lot of service providers doing, especially when they need to do some geo expansion. They have one large customer that needs a footprint in the different regions where they don't own their own data center. Then with that combination of on-prem Cloud Director and Cloud Director Service in the other region, they can very easily fit this customer need. And then, of course, when we look about Cloud Partner Navigator to allow them to be that managed service provider for other cloud services from VMware perspective and from the VMware product portfolio, that of course also falls into that category to cater for service providers that do not run their own infrastructure all over the place.
Anyone else seeing something similar? Matthias, you nodded at least quickly.
Yeah, so I think the direction you talked about it's a massive one, especially reselling hyperscaler gear. So what I saw is like service providers are reselling like Azure desktops a lot, and just having a small infrastructure providing desktops with 3D GPU, whatever needed, and a GPU gear not being available in the hyperscaler infrastructure. So really specialized hardware kind of. but customers are willing to pay more for those desktops. So it's easier to sell those niche services instead of trying to compete with the hyperscalers in price terms.
Yeah, talking about vGPUs, by the way, we didn't talk at all about that yet, but in January we also had a new release of vCD with version 10.3.2, which now has the first level of vGPU support. So you can use the NVIDIA physical GPUs in the servers with the GPU profiles in vSphere, and then use the placement policies in vCD to map these, to create vGPU profiles for the virtual machines and then publish them to the different organization VDCs. So as a service provider, that's a pretty powerful offering, even if in the first version it might be rather simple and not too many options, but it is flexible enough to provide more flexibility than for your tenants or for your end customers than the hyperscalers when it comes to these GPU services.
Right, now I want a desktop with a GPU.
No, and also here the story is, as Yves already mentioned, I don't think really that we will have so many desktop as a service providers in the near future, because this is clearly a market which now Microsoft is fully in. Related to the subscription-based license model, they already started to provide this MS365. But also on the other hand, if you really have a look to the current solutions, for example, Horizon on Azure, that you already can utilize also Linux desktops on Azure. I really think that especially the desktop market will be fully handled by hyperscalers in the future, and not by, maybe for some, like Matthias mentioned, for some small use cases where really need specialized hardware for service providers, but the rest of the market will be clearly done here on the hyperscaler side.
There's one thing where I think a certain type of service providers that will be able to capture these desktop workloads as well, that I've seen, is service providers that specialize on a certain industry or a certain sort of niche of vertical, so that they don't provide the full generic capabilities for infrastructure service for everything, but for example, there are special service providers for healthcare or for the automobile industry, and then that's a service provider that has a lot of business know-how as well, and they can offer a full service to their end customer, even if it's server infrastructure, and then they also can typically capture some desktop workloads as well, because they know exactly the requirements for the customer, and they can build the infrastructure based on these requirements, rather than like a hyperscaler who can offer or has to build a platform that can offer pretty much everything, but nothing too special or too exactly fit.
Good. Okay, I think we are getting to the top of the hour. Anything else we are expecting from 2022? And that will be, I think, the closing statement from everybody as well, because we don't want to overstretch the sessions by making another 75, 90-minute session again. So any other expectations from 2022, what we are going to see in the service provider space? I go first. What I'm definitely expecting this year, the whole hybrid cloud scenario, we will see definitely an increase in demand for also disaster recovery and copy services, where companies just finally see that they need to do more to be prepared for any kind of disaster. So that's definitely one of the areas where I see we will see a big increase this year. We will overall still a continued big increase for companies moving towards the cloud, whether it's always going to a hyperscaler. I doubt that. The small and medium service providers we have within the VMware ecosystem, 4,000, 5,000. So there are quite a few which have very interesting niche solutions as well. But I think that will definitely grow for this year. And hopefully by the end of the year, we can finally then say there is no NSXV in the service provider space anymore. But let's see how we get there. Who wants to go next? Toby is already nodding. So Toby, you're next.
No NSXV would be perfect. What I really see more and more coming is the whole Tanzu / Kubernetes story in Cloud Director, and also for service providers. This really will be more and more become state of the art in 2022. And last but not least, security. So this is what I also see, that this year really will be an interesting part of having security, especially on load balancing side, and especially on networking side. More and more security will be coming interesting on service provider side.
So will it be the year of the security?
I would say it is not the year of VDI anymore. It is now the year of security. Matthias.
Maybe it's going to be the year of desktop security. Just to use, so it's VDIS. I still hope that the whole story about migrating vCD and that v's done will come into place, and that most of the SPs and companies are aware that v's gone or will be gone in the near future, no support anymore and stuff. And yeah, and VMworld in person, I still stick with that one. Yeah,
for me, TKG for sure is a huge topic. I would combine that with, as we mentioned, GPU from a technical perspective, mainly to create some full stack solution or full stack infrastructure for these machine learning and AI workloads. That is a huge topic where end customers have a lot of use cases for that, but they are currently just ramping up knowledge and typically don't have the infrastructure in-house. So it's a huge opportunity for service provider partners to help them providing the infrastructure and perhaps even providing a lot of, again, knowledge to go up the stack and provide them, a good solution so that the end customer can really focus on their applications. And Romain.
Yeah, what to say after 5 for 4 guys like that? No, I mean, I'm just trying to think out loud. Like it's more security. Once like NSXT is the foundation for advanced networking and security services. So when everyone will be there, it will open new use cases and really high value use cases. I'm also seeing more and more potential for better extensibility inside vCD, which would open also some additional cool use cases in the future. And VMworld in person.
Good, everybody. Thank you all for the session, and we will talk again end of March and try to get the session online then as quick as possible. I'm going to be in the US that week then and prepare for a US event, but hope to catch up there, and thank you all for listening. We will post this again as always on all of the social media platforms as well as in all the podcast platforms as usual. Thank you, and if you have any topics we should cover in one of the next sessions, please let us know over Twitter, email, direct messages, or whatever you can find. And with that, happy 2022.